Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time of day it is you're listening to the Tattooed Teacher podcast. On today's episode, we have Mathew Green. Now, Mathew is first and foremost a husband and a father of two daughters, an educator, a writer, and researcher. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in English and Education from the University of Sydney, a Masters of Teaching in Primary Education from my alma mater, the University of Western Sydney, graduate diploma in TESOL from University of Wollongong. Geez, I hope we got enough time for questions, Matt. As well as a certificate in school management and leadership from Harvard University. He has been involved in education for over 15 years, has taught both in the high-performing independent schools as well as low socioeconomic schools in southwest of Sydney. He's currently the assistant principal at a school that he absolutely loves. And Mathew is also the founder and host of the Art of Teaching podcast, which has over 150 episodes and is currently in its 15th season. So, Mathew, I hope we've got time for some questions. Welcome to the Tattooed Teacher.
Look, thank you. It's an absolute joy to be here, Phil. I should get you to follow me around and just introduce me because it sounds very impressive. But look, first and foremost, like you said, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, and that for me is the most important thing. And I think out of that, I get to do some really amazing things and work with just some truly, truly brilliant educators in the public education system. And it's something that I've been doing for, I think this week was 17 years in education, 14 in public education and 3 in independent schools. And I've just really loved it. It's just super fun. We are entering a new season. We're about to have our youngest child start kindergarten next year. So that's interesting. I just got back from parent-teacher interviews from my daughter's school today, and being on the receiving end of that feedback is a new experience. So, yeah, but it's a joy to be with you, Phil. Thank you so much for the invitation.
No worries. Yeah, well, thanks for taking your time. I mean, you're a busy man with obviously your work, your research, your podcasting, but also at this time of year, you school holiday time, spending time with those. You're not on there yet?
Not yet. We're in New South Wales. We're in our final week, so we are well and truly into parent-teacher interviews, reports. It's all happening. But yeah, I don't. It's funny you mentioned the word busy, Phil, because I don't really feel like I am. Like I'm just doing stuff that I think is interesting, stuff that I'm really passionate about, and also like I say no to like a lot of stuff. I really do. And so I think for me, I mean, yeah, for me, it's about just creating space for what's really important. Yeah. So I don't feel like I'm busy, but I do feel like there's a lot of things going on, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, by the sounds of it, you've been able to master one of the most complex sentences in the English language, and that's no. So we'll get onto that a little bit later.
Yeah, I'm not always great at it, to be honest. But I am learning, and like I said, we'll probably get onto this, but I am learning that I mean, we're always saying no, aren't we? Like for you, saying yes to having a conversation with me, and it is a huge privilege to speak to you. You're actually saying no to spending time with your new grandchild. Like, so we are saying no to everything. By me saying yes to having a conversation with you, I'm saying no to spending time with my wife. So I feel like we are always saying no to something. We don't always realize that, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time also. And into that, so we're talking about our yeses and our nos, and that you don't feel busy even though you're doing a lot. But what's your why behind it all?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I've got a number of whys. For me, my faith is really, really important, and it's something that I actually don't talk about a lot. I work in the government sector. It's a huge privilege, but I don't really talk about it a lot. But it would be amiss of me not to say that that's a huge motivating factor for me because I get to play a part in adding value to young people, and I get to play a part in adding value to and investing into some of the amazing educators that I have the privilege of working with, leading, working alongside. So that's kind of my main why. But also, like, my life was transformed by education. I remember, and I've told this story multiple times, so much so that my wife's sick of hearing it. But I remember a couple of teachers I had in this little school in Long Road Primary School in the middle of England, middle of nowhere, and we were going through a really difficult family time. Family was separating, as many people do, and it's really difficult. And for me, school was a safe place, like a place where I felt valued, and I'd walk in every day, and whatever happened outside of school, whatever happened at home, school was a place that I knew there would be someone there that really wanted to see me, like my teachers. And so being able to play a small part in contributing to that same environment for the kids that I get to work with now is a huge privilege. I mean, yes, there's content and lessons and all that stuff is super, super important, and um, it should be excellent. It really should. But really, it's not about that, is it? Like, it's about adding value to young people, and about, I'm really interested in schools and their structure. I think they're really incredible organizations, quite like unlike anything else. So that's kind of my why. And also now, as we mentioned before, like, I've got a daughter in year one, and I've got another daughter in kindergarten. So as a parent on the receiving end of communication from schools, it just adds another element of intrigue. And so I think that's my why. But I ask myself every day. I say, like, would I be happy for my daughter to sit through this lesson that I just taught? And some days when things don't go to plan, you go, yeah, probably not. But then I ask myself, well, if it's not good for my daughter, if it's not good enough for my daughter, why do I feel like it's okay for someone else's child? And so I think for me, and not everyone has the privilege of being a parent, I understand that. But for me, becoming a parent has really crystallized that why for me, about why I get up every day, why I get to work early in the morning, all that kind of stuff, leave late at night, is because we have the privilege of investing into young people, and it's such a trusted profession, and I love it. Yeah, so that's a very long question. That's my why, and yeah, I love it. I love what I get to do. It's a privilege.
Yeah, it is. It is a privilege, and like you said, when you become a parent, when you have that privilege of becoming a parent, and not all people do. Some people
Mm,
struggle and just don't have that opportunity for whatever
yeah.
reason. Other people choose not to, and everyone's got their own story to write. But it's it's a it crystallizes, as you said, your thought, and like, geez, am I doing what I should be doing? Is this what I want for my child as well?
Mm,
And you were talking about a safe space, and we know. I mean, I've had the privilege of working in some very exclusive schools, and for some of them, and whilst money is a great privilege, some of them don't have the best home lives.
totally.
And so school was a safe place. It's a place where they could come and just feel cared for.
Mm.
So yeah, it's an honour to be a teacher, and I think, yeah, it'd be great if a few more people saw that as well.
Yeah, I think so, and for me, I don't think I could do anything else. I really don't. And I'm not saying I will always. I thought forever I would be a classroom teacher, and that was it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, um, but I thought, this is me forever. I have no plans for leadership. I have no plans for. I just want to teach kids. And then I had the privilege of working with an incredible principal who showed me what was possible in leadership. And I now have the privilege of working with her again in my substantive school, which is an amazing opportunity. But I never wanted to do that. And so, like, I don't know, like, it's a good reminder, I think, that for me, moving into more of a leadership role was more of like an expansion. And I thought, okay, instead of having an impact on 28 kids, I can have an impact on 130 kids or 140 kids. It may be different. And as well, like I never really had any aspirations, I think, to go into principalship. But now I'm thinking I can have an impact in a larger number of kids. It may look different, and that's not to take away from the amazing role that classroom teachers do. But yeah, I've started to think a lot more about scale. And that's one of the reasons why I launched the podcast, is because I thought, um, like, we are having a conversation now. I've never met you in person. I've spoken to you online a number of times, but we're having a conversation, and the potential of us spending an hour having a discussion and then transmitting that to thousands of people across the globe is a really crazy concept, but it doesn't require any extra effort from us. And so I think I've started to really think about scale a lot more as a teacher and how we can have the biggest impact. And as well, I know it was a huge privilege to have you on the podcast and speak about some of the stuff that you're doing, because I think quite often institutions, whether it be government, private, independent, can sometimes be a little bit insular. And I think what we need to do is, there's amazing things happening in the independent sector that I need to know about so I can teach my kids better. There's amazing things happening in the government sector that I'm sure you can learn lessons from. So it's really about breaking down those barriers and also doing something at scale, because I'm just like you. I've got a family, I've got a life, I've got stuff I'm doing. I'm trying to walk 10,000 steps a day. It's really hard. There's not a lot of time. So what's the best and most efficient and the easiest way that we can have the biggest impact on the largest number of educators and then students? And for me, it was by having these conversations. So I don't know. It's changed. I think the way that we do professional learning now it's just changed the game. Like, I can have access, I can learn from your experience for free on the internet whenever I want. Like, that is just an amazing concept. But yeah, you're a fellow podcaster. So how have you found the process?
Oh, look, it's been great. Like one of my drives behind it, one of my whys with the podcast, is to get educators' stories out there, and
Mm,
they could be a high school teacher, they could be a primary teacher, they could be someone who's just, I guess, involved in education somewhere, and it might not necessarily be in the classroom, but they're a teacher of some description, or they were, and like one of my guests to come out probably in a few weeks, she was a teacher, but was had to leave the profession. So it's just to get those stories out there so that we can all learn from each other.
lovely.
Now, I mean, both you and I, we've been in the game for a while now, um, and we've learnt how to operate daily, how
Yeah,
to
it's true.
hone our skills in the classroom. That we're not perfect, the children aren't perfect, but we've pushed through. I think that tough. I think the toughest part is that first 4 to 5 years. But it's, yeah, just to get those stories out there. So hopefully, some of these younger teachers who are excited to be in the profession don't get beat up by it and have to leave for their own sake. So
Mm,
that's part of the drive. You know, there's about 500,000 teachers in Australia. Um, I don't think I'll speak to all of them, but I'd like to speak to a few just to hear their story and what they're doing
yeah,
in their classrooms.
that's great. That's great.
So it's a lot of fun, and with what you're doing. So you're talking about, you always thought you were a classroom teacher,
Mm,
but then opportunities have arisen, and you've grabbed hold of them. Now you started out your teaching career in private education.
yeah,
Then you transitioned across to
I did.
the government system. How did you find that, and what was your motivation? Because I mean, so many people go, "Well, you're in the private system. Why would you leave? You've got the bells and
Yeah.
whistles." But
Um, Really good question. So let me think, it was a while ago. I was getting married, so my wife and I were getting married, or at least we were engaged 17 years ago. So we've been married 15 years this year. Um, and I just needed a job. And I knew that it was easier to get a foot in the door in the independent schools, so I could teach pretty much straight away out of university in the independent schools. I didn't need to wait for a government interview. I didn't need to wait for a teaching number to come through. I obviously had to have one through NESA, which is our accreditation, but I could pretty much go straight away. So I think I had a friend whose son attended the school that I was wanting to work at, and I sent them a resume and said, "Let's have a chat." They phoned me and said, "We've got a class," and it was easy. So I was there for a couple of years. Then I took a permanent position in a sister school, um, uh, their sister school, and that was an awful experience, an absolutely awful experience. And um, I thought, this is the dream. I've got a permanent position. You get paid a little bit more, or you did at the time in the independent sector. So I was a 24-year-old kid, 23-year-old kid with on good money. And I thought, this is the dream. Permanent position, prominent school in Sydney. And then I witnessed firsthand the politics and the craziness that occurs in many schools, and I resigned. And it was an awful experience. And I kind of vowed, I think I spent 3 or 4 days in bed. I remember phoning my wife and being so like ashamed and embarrassed, and I lost my job, and this is the person she was going to marry. And I know she left her work and came home and just spent time with me and spent a couple of days in bed, and that was it. And then I thought, you know what, that's it, I'm done. I'm not teaching anymore. Which looking back seems pretty dramatic, but at the time it was awful. And then my wonderful mother-in-law knew an assistant principal, and they were looking for a classroom teacher. And I thought, and this was in the government sector, and I thought, look, I trust her. I trust this assistant principal because she was referred to by my mother-in-law. Going to give it a go. And so that was in southwestern Sydney. Quite a complex school, very different to the lush green grass on in some of the private schools. I'm deliberately being cryptic here so as not to reveal the name of the schools that I worked at. And then got a position in the Department of Education and a temporary contract. So kept extending it, worked with some amazing, amazing educators. And then I worked on kindy for a number of years, loved it. And then I took at the time the department was offering a retraining opportunity to specialize in teaching English as an additional language. So as a specialist teacher and also working with refugee students and new arrival students, took that position. And then that led to many, many wonderful, happy years at another school in southwestern Sydney. And then from there, had the privilege of working with my current boss. She was there in a relieving role as the principal. Had no desire to go into leadership. And then I think she forwarded me a job for a relieving assistant principal role. Took that position, didn't really know what I was doing. And then took a couple of relieving roles over a period of 4 or 5 years. And then went back to that school, my substantive school, went back on class, and then took another relieving role, and then ended up working substantively in the school that I'm at. So it's weird, like, I've heard this saying that you can't like connect the dots looking forward, but you can looking back. And when I look back, I think, wow, like that was a path. I don't know if it was set out, but it makes sense that there are all these little steps along the way. There were many moments like feeling a little bit lost and a bit overwhelmed, and but I wouldn't change that for the world because I got to work with some amazing bosses. I got to work with some bosses that were challenging, and during that time, it really caused me to ask that question, like, why are you doing this and who are you doing it for? And I definitely went through that stage when I first started in leadership that I liked saying I was an assistant principal. It sounded good. Like it sounded like I'd ticked off that step. I mean, it was nice to bring it up at a barbecue. It just sounded like I was making progress.
Yep.
But I felt that during that time, really, that why was really refined and really kind of singed down to its elements of why you're doing it. And I know a lot of people that do things for titles and they do things because it looks good. But I can genuinely say now that that's something that I'm really not interested in. What I am interested in is having the maximum amount of impact in as many kids as we can, and also building a great team. And yeah, and one of the things I'm trying not to do now is when I meet someone, I'm trying not to mention that I teach, because I think so many people, um, that's their like identity and their driving force, that I'm a teacher or I'm this or I'm that. And so I'm trying to withhold that information for as long as I can.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because the culture of you
Yeah,
introduce yourself and the first thing, oh, so what do you do?
yeah,
And you see, some people struggle with it because some people are out of work, some people want to work but can't work,
yeah.
some people have disability or a chronic illness that prevents
Mm,
them from working, and so they feel less than because other people go, well, I'm such and such and I do
yeah,
this, and so I a lot of people ask me, so what do you do? And I was like, well, like day to day, I just go, I teach, and that's it. And I try
yeah.
and limit it to that, depending on the circle that I'm in. So,
Really.
um,
And
I've been at conferences, and we talked about that you moved from the private system to the public system, and I, for my the whole 20+ years that I've been teaching so far, is my hat is always tipped to the public system, because they don't have a say of pretty much who comes into their classroom. There's certain mandates that they have to follow. Maybe they don't believe them. They don't have a choice of a whole range of things that
mm,
I've been privileged enough to have in the schools that I've worked in.
mm.
Um,
I
and
think they feel like it's important to realize that there are some incredible strengths about having one vast dynamic system. Like I think one of the which is with the government sector, and one of the misconceptions I think is that there's this sort of standardized approach, and there really isn't. Like every single school that I go to is different, and it is its own expression within the community, and I think that's lovely. And there's also great benefit, I think, in being part of one system where if you're like, if I'm, for example, if I'm trying to work out how to implement a new teaching strategy, like explicit teaching, for example, I can go, hey, this school down the road has done that. I'm going to go and watch them. It's one system. We have that collaboration. Or, for example, if students move from one school to the next within the one system, it's really easy to pick up the phone and say, hey, these are the ways that we've been supporting the student, or these are the ways that we have done this, or this is more of a context of what's going on. And what tends to happen when people move from system to system in terms of public to independent to private is there's not that, not always that transfer of that information. And so I think I don't, I don't know if I would, for me, public education is it. Like it really is. And I've got so many friends that are doing an amazing work in the independent schools, but I love just how much of an expression each school is of their community, and how much they have that accent and how embedded they are. And I think, respectfully to many of our independent colleagues, is um, there's I feel like it's definitely not as inclusive, I think, because there is a level of income, there is a level of exclusivity, and it's not always the case. And there's definitely some more than others, but I really love being part of that system. And I love being able to pick up the phone and calling the school down the road and saying, hi, I'm Matt, I'm from this school. Can we come over and see what you're doing? Because we've heard it's really good. And also things like having a whole team of people in corporate that are supporting the work that we're doing. So we have like well-being policies and structures that come through. We have curriculum reform and some of the most amazing educators working behind the scenes in different offices around the country and at home, really supporting the great work that schools do. So I think there's definitely some benefits. Uh, there's some challenges. I mean, there is challenges working in an organization which tends to be quite, it tends to take a while to move, but once it moves quick. But yeah, I love it. I really love it. It's a huge privilege. Um, I'm not saying I wouldn't work in the independent sector, um, but right now I think public education for me is the way to go. And also, and I don't want to get political, and I don't want to pull down the work that our private school colleagues are doing, but there is something. I think it's inherently a human right to have access to world class education, um, whether you can afford it or not. And so, as I said, I don't want to take away from my colleagues in the independent sector, but I do think it's important that all people, regardless of their background, regardless of their abilities, regardless of their however they come to this country, or whatever their home life is, I think access to high quality education is hugely important. So, yeah, not
Oh,
getting political, but yeah,
no, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
yeah,
I couldn't agree with you more. It's just the choices that, again, for me, that I made.
yeah,
And I'm also, a high school teacher, and I born and raised in Southwest Sydney, so I
yeah.
know
You
the
would know that,
challenge.
yeah,
I know the challenges that they have,
yeah.
and I was a targeted graduate whilst I was doing my education degree. They wanted me in a particular school, and the day before, or it was like a week before they offered me the job. That particular suburb, a teacher was assaulted quite viciously at school, and I was going to be the replacement. As I was a mature age student, but that just because I have had a bit of life experience, I had no
Mm,
classroom experience. So and then I was again offered a job to help found a school out in central west New South Wales. So
mm.
tremendous opportunity for a first year teacher.
Amazing. And can I ask Phil, like, what are some of the things that people that work in the government sector should know about the independent sector? Because, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely coming at it from a government bubble, but what are some of the things that you think, yeah, people should know about the work that you guys do? I know it's a generalization, but
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it is an absolute generalisation and stereotype, but you touched on it, of the exclusivity, and the affluence that some schools offer. But from all my experience in schools, sh- kids are kids.
yeah, you still got
They
problems.
they
Yeah.
go through the battles that every teenager does. I've had students on suicide watch. I've had breakdown in families. I've had kids not eating for a whole range of reasons, from not having food on the table because parents are working three jobs to try and pay for their education. Um, so
Yeah.
there's all these things and it's not just where the elite. Now there are some, like, don't get me wrong, um, but it's students are students,
Hmm.
and they have the battles and challenges that every single child has.
And
Um,
there would be like tremendous. I mean, you would have those people that where money is not an issue,
yeah,
but still they would go through things. I mean, just because you have money doesn't mean anything. But also there would be parents that are making tremendous sacrifices
yeah,
to send their children to certain places, and I think um, that's also something which I think people don't consider. I think they maybe see like an elitism, but then forget. You know what? Like there's a lot of normal mums and dads and normal family members that are giving up so much for that education. And so I think there's struggle everywhere, isn't there?
yeah. Like, I know one family, both mum and dad were working three jobs, 7 days a week to send their send their son to an exclusive, expensive school because they said it's worth the sacrifice.
It's amazing.
To educate and to give him the opportunities that we never had.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and
That's
I
so
think
admirable.
some teachers miss that.
Mm.
That they don't see the sacrifices that
Mm.
some parents make. They just think that. Now, look, don't get me wrong. There was one student, an amazing young man, had tremendous wealth, very old money as such, but his father said, and you could have a conversation like you and I are having a conversation now, very very well spoken, very polite, very well mannered, and we chatted one day, and I said, look, mate, like you're a great young man, like tell me a bit about yourself, and he goes, well, look, granddad did this, and dad now runs the business, and me and my brothers will eventually take over. But we have been taught from day one that it's the person that matters, not the money.
Wow.
And if we treat people with respect, with kindness, with courtesy, and that we don't judge for any reason, that gives us the. He used the word wealth, but he didn't use it as in money. He said that gives us the wealth of relationship, I think it
Mm.
was.
That's cool.
So yeah, there's a
Amazing.
whole range of things
Yeah.
that happens, and I know like you're working as a leader in a public school in a not the wealthiest of areas, with a lot of challenges, a lot of non-English speaking background, a lot of immigrant families, and you have the opportunity not only to make an impact in the students' lives, but as a leader, you would have the privilege and
Mm.
opportunity to speak into families' lives to start to also shape community.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It is a huge privilege, and some days you get it right, and other days are really hard. Um, uh, but yeah, I think Sydney, especially where I'm working, is changing so fast. There's a brand new airport going in down the road from our school, which brings a new level of access, a new level of wealth, a new level of expectation. I mean, the development in that sort of southwestern Sydney corridor is immense, and so you have people with this new university that's gone in. You have people that are that have incredibly high aspirations. People that may have moved to the country, or people that are trying to that want more better opportunities for their kids, that they have these incredible aspirations, but then you're also dealing with some quite deep social conditions as well, like challenges with welfare and cost of living and all of this stuff, which Australia is going through, but I think in particular Sydney is really wrestling with at the moment. So it is difficult. So you have this mixture and these two worlds, or in some cases, three or four different worlds colliding in these central spots, which are government schools. But it's a privilege. It is wonderful. But like I said, there are days that are really, really hard. Yeah, it's really hard. Schools are very strange structures. They're these amazing organic structures, but they are very they're made of people, and people are challenging, and I am emotional, and there's a lot going on. And so yeah, schools are really these incredible organic mechanisms, and to get to work in one is a privilege, but we don't always get it right. It's hard.
No, and I think as people we don't get things right, and
No.
as teachers we don't get things right, especially and I think that's also important for. I mean, I know for me anyway, it's
Yeah.
important for my students to see when I don't get things right.
Yeah.
When they see that I'll let them know if I'm having a bad day,
Mm.
and one of the things especially towards the end of term, because I teach high school, towards the end of term, it's like, all right, like boys, I've got girls in the class, but they're generally well behaved. but it's just like all the lads start playing up, and it's just like, boys, I'm tired. I've got pressures on. I've got to get reporting done. I've got to do this. It's the end of term. All of us are tired as teachers, and you guys are worn out too. But don't do something that's going to get you in trouble. Don't do something that is pretty insignificant that's going to cause a possible overreaction. And what I've found is when I give them that sort of honesty and respect and courtesy to go, look, this is where I'm at. I don't want to do it, but you might just push a button that they're like, oh, okay. So they start to think about their actions and they start to behave a little bit differently. And I mean, I've always said that students will always rise or fall to meet expectations. And have you found that in your experience that by being a little bit more open and honest? I mean, you've got to be careful. Obviously, you can't be, completely open with them. But do you find that helps in the relationships in your school?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to be open. I mean, I was talking to a group of kids in my office today, and on the picture on the wall next to my computer are the pictures of my kids. And I said, "Hey, these are my kids," and they looked at them and they're like, "Oh, you've got kids?" And it's something so simple. And I think for them realizing that we are people outside of this place is really important. And I remember when I was little and you'd see a teacher out in the shops and you'd freak out because you think that they just lived at school. But I try to do that. I try to share a little bit of my life outside of school. Quite often with parents, I'll say, "Look, I'm a parent. Like I get it. I get it. If my daughter came home upset and sad and all of that kind of stuff, it would break my heart. I get it. How can I help you?" So I think showing a bit of humanity and a bit of sort of a little bit, to some degree, of your life outside of school is really, really important. And I quite often share. I was working with a group of boys today, stage 3 boys, and it just ended term, a little bit ratty. And I said exactly what you're saying. I said, "Look, guys, I'm pretty tired at the moment. Like, I'm not feeling very well. We've got 3 days to go. How can we get through this?" And we had I think, a really productive lesson. So I think sort of gone are the days, thank goodness, where teachers are these sort of authority figures standing at the front of the room, barking out commands. I think that doesn't work. I mean, you'll get work done, but students don't work. They don't learn from people they don't like or they don't respect. And so I think showing a little bit of humanity is important. And also, like, one of the things that we do as a family, and my daughters, my 4-year-old and 6-year-old and wife, are way better at this than I am. But we make it right. Like, if we're cranky at each other, my daughters and my wife notice when there's something kind of out of alignment, and they'll be, "Oh, something's not right there." Or if my 2-year-old gets cranky and says, "I hate you because I wouldn't give her a Mars bar for dinner," like, they're actually really good at saying sorry. And even in my class and with my team, and my colleagues, I say sorry really quickly. I say, "Look, I'm really sorry. I didn't sleep last night. I shouldn't have reacted like that." And it's nothing major. It just might be you're a little bit snappy or you're a little bit whatever. But we say sorry really quickly and say, "Look, yeah." I think it's nice. I've worked in schools. My first experience as a school leader, I thought that you had to I thought they had to be a certain way as a leader. I must have read this management book written in the 80s or whatever, and you've got to look a certain way and act a certain way. And I thought because that was modeled to me, that was how you needed to act. And it's just not true. And I think I got sick of trying to be like someone else. And I thought, no, I'm just going to be authentic. Like, you got to be professional, but if you're not feeling it and if you're cranky, that's fine. And yeah, I think one of the things I am quite good at is building that openness and that safety within a team. I think I'm quite good at that. Of course, there's a flip side to that because sometimes you've got to have those conversations to say, "Hey, come on, let's step this up." But I do think I'm able to build that relational trust. And I'm not being manipulative. It's not, I think it's just genuinely important to know, like, what chocolates do your team like? Or when are their birthdays? Or what are their kids' names? Or it's important. And you would do that with your students. And you should do that, I think, with the people that you lead. Yeah, it's important, mate. It's just, we're just humans. We're humans first. It comes back to that identity question. Like, we all have a life outside of these classrooms, and it's a life that should be celebrated. And I think the great thing about teaching is that whatever your experience, whether you've been a plumber before you teach, whether you've come straight out of uni, whether you, I don't know, I was speaking to a principal a couple of weeks ago who's into death metal, and I'm like, that's awesome. Like, whatever you bring your whole self to the profession, and through your experience, like, you can teach kids things that I could never teach them. And I think let's bring that into the classroom. So to answer your question, yeah, be authentic. It's just easier.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, having that honesty and that transparency. I mean, I try and bring it, and like I let the kids know. It's like I was a rat bag at school. I was a terrible
Yep.
student. I was more about having fun with my mates than I was about learning. But I am some of the
Mm.
things that I missed back then. Some of the ways that, and I said, look, school's not about. Well, it is about curriculum and gaining a certain amount of knowledge. That's part of it. But I said the greater part is learning how to learn, like
I agree.
becoming that lifelong learner, wanting to
Yeah.
challenge yourself, wanting to be able to think about
Yeah.
things. And I said I missed some of those building blocks to do that later in life, and I'm suffering the
Mm.
repercussions. So there's things that I have to work really hard at in order to do my job.
Yeah.
And so with school, there's going to be things that you're going to have to work really hard at. They suck and you don't want to do them. But if you learn the lesson now in a safe environment, you are going to go on to kick goals in
Really.
whatever stage or whatever your vision of success is.
Mm. Yeah, and it goes back to what we were saying before. Like, school is really about, like, building little humans, or sorry, building adults.
Yeah.
And yes, the content is so important, and as you said, it should be good and it should be world class and all of that stuff. But really, like, we're preparing young people to be citizens in the future. Like, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And what do we want these people to look like? Like, I struggle with that as a parent. Like, I see my daughter struggling with, I don't know, writing a sentence, and I want to jump in and fix it. And I've had to learn, you know what? You need to step back and you need to allow them to productively struggle through it, because there's going to be some point in her life, well, I'm not there to fix it. So it's hard because you want to jump in, you want to do this stuff, but actually taking the time to build that resilience is really, really important. Yeah, it's the more I think about it, the more it messes with my head, because it is such a privilege to get to do what we do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think especially with the primary and infants sort of roles, I think even more so, like as in that younger learning, in that primary
Mm.
learning, that's where it's really taking place. That's where the real
Yeah.
hard work is. By the time they get into my classroom, generally speaking, they've got a pretty good grasp of what is required and what's expected and how to behave and how to interact with others. Often about year 9, that just all falls out their heads, but that's part of the challenges of high school. But in that early learning years, that's where it's, I think, so important to have that how to relate to people, how to relate to adults, how to relate to those that you don't like, how to be put in an environment where it's safe not to succeed, but
Mm.
shown how to lift yourself up and dust yourself off and go, okay, I didn't do it then, but I'm gonna have another go.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I couldn't agree more.
So yeah, all yeah. I did a 2-week prac as a primary teacher in my education degree, and that cemented in my mind that I was never going to be a primary teacher.
Well, I mean, I feel the same way. I have an immense respect for my high school colleagues, but I just don't think it's for me. Like,
Yeah,
I just, I, people say, how on earth do you teach primary? And I go, how on earth do you teach high school?
yeah,
And so I think it also comes back to what we were saying before, especially in the government system. It is one system. So we do work at the foundational level. And I think so much of primary is teaching kids how to have those foundations for a lifelong life of loving learning, and how to teach them how to regulate themselves. And then we pass them on to you guys. Um, yeah, I think it's incredible the work that you guys do and the things you're dealing with. You're dealing with hormones and all this stuff, and I think amazing job. But is it for me? Shouldn't say never, but at the moment, absolutely not.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so true.
It's
That
funny how
it,
you're wired, though, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. It's horses for courses for sure. Um, and like talking about that handoff, so you guys do all that really foundational
Yeah,
learning, and you put in those building blocks for success, and not always, various circumstance stop children doing gaining that. But do you think or have you seen a disconnect between that year 6 or end of primary school and year 7?
that's a really good question, and I don't think I'm the best person to speak to that, because it has been a while. It has been a while since I've supervised stage 3. I do know that in primary schools, generally speaking, they are ready to go by about term 3. Um, but I think it would be really hard, because you go from being the biggest kid in a small school to the smallest kid in a big school, and that would be terrifying. And I know that a lot of that bravado that we see in year 6 is kind of put back in check coming into year 7. But it's hard. It's hard to talk to the kids and say, "Hey, I know what high school's like." It's like, no, you don't. It's like, no, I do. Like, I remember going to high school. I remember that feeling of being a bit lost. I remember that feeling of autonomy and no one like telling you where to go. You just expected to turn up at English. And so I'm just thinking about the work that we do with our stage 3s. There's a wonderful lady that supervises our stage 3s, and they start to sort of drip feed, and they might move to a different class for English or move to a different class for science, and get them used to that sort of movement and organization. In terms of a disconnect, I'm not too sure. I know it's a huge shock to the system, though. Like, we quite often see them come back to pick up their younger siblings, and they're like, "You were right." I said, I know."
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I see it all the time. I see they're in just like an environment that's stable. Like, it's just one teacher. They know they've got their friend. They're in one class.
yeah,
Everyone does math together. Everyone does music together. Everyone does all the various
yeah,
KLAs together. But then all of a sudden they move up to high school, and then okay, you're in math B, you're in math C, and you're in this, and
yeah.
you're over here, and okay, well, you've got this, and it's a music lesson now, so you're out of that class, and
But it,
and so you see
yeah,
these doe-eyed little babies, really.
and it's such a different relationship, because we have a group of kids for the entire year. So they see us every school day, pretty much for the year, and you're teaching them everything. You're teaching them how to, I mean, in kindy, how to tie your shoelaces. You're teaching them how to organize themselves. You're the one that's teaching them in year 6 about body changes and all that kind of stuff. And so in many ways in primary school, I know my child's teacher spends more time with her each day probably than I do.
Yeah.
Um, and I just had a parent teacher interview today, and I just said, look, thank you. Thanks. Like, that's my feedback. Thanks for the work that you do to make school an incredible place for my year 1 student, my year 1 child. Yeah, that's my feedback. And I think the amount of nurturing and the amount of closeness and connection in primary school, it obviously changes as you get to stage 3, but you're still with that teacher every single day. And then, like, I mean, that's great, but if you don't like your teacher, that's also quite challenging. I think the good thing in high school is that you get to move around, but we also say to them, there's going to be teachers that you don't like. You might have a maths teacher that you don't like or doesn't like you. Like,
Yeah,
so how are you going to deal with that? You're going to have you're going to have teachers that you really love and you can't wait, and you're going to have subjects that you find boring, but are not boring because the subjects are bad. They're boring because the teacher hates the subject, and it's this whole it's a whole nother world. So
yeah,
yeah, it's a whole nother world, mate.
yeah. It's that again. We talked about teaching these little humans how to
Mm,
learn, like how to become
yeah,
successful in whatever career pathway they choose. So
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's definitely education is a fragile ecosystem. Um, there can
It's
be
yeah,
one personality can shift the whole thing
but
for
even like it made me think about the dynamics of a primary school classroom. Like you are in one classroom with one teacher, one primary teacher, like main teacher, for the whole year. Like this classroom is your world, and you can make it. You know what? You can make it great. You can put art on the wall. It can look incredible. Um, this is your home, and then the seismic shift when all that is taken away and you move up to high school is immense.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, I've
it's
had
huge.
conversations like that with students about that massive change. Because because I teach a specialized subject, we often, depending on the school, well, it's often a rotation subject for year 7 and 8. And I said, look, if I don't remember your name by the end of term, that's not a bad thing. It just means you've done everything that I've asked you to do, and you've been a perfect student. It's when often I'll learn the kids who often play up or ask way too many questions. They're the names I learn first. But
Hmm.
if you do everything that I ask of you, that's what I want from you, so
Yeah,
that you can come out of here knowing something that you didn't know in the start. So,
yeah, yeah.
uh, I
But
mean, we could talk all night about this, I'm sure.
yeah, and I think it is important, and it's good it's good once again to have that conversation not only across sectors, but also from primary to high school. I think that's so important because I don't think we do that enough because we don't have time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a really great conversation to have and one that's really needed.
Well, you'll have to come back and we'll have to talk a little bit more about it again.
Oh yeah, I'd love to, and yeah, I mean, these conversations really matter, so it's important to have them.
Absolutely. And speaking of time, it is getting on, and you're at the tail end of term. So our kids, all mine are grown up now, and I do have my first grandchild, which is fantastic. But
Yeah,
we all know that children don't care what time you go to bed; they still get up at the same time. So I want to thank you for your time. But just before we finish up, and I want to be respectful of your time, just before we finish up, just a couple of questions, just to wrap up. Um,
cool.
so first one is, what's your favourite drink?
Oh, good question. Coffee
Coffee.
or Earl Grey tea.
My dad was an Earl Grey drinker.
Yeah, apparently you're supposed to drink it with lemon and black, but I can't do that.
Yeah, he just had it black. That was it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah, I drink Yorkshire tea now. That's all I drink. So
You know what? I've just got into that. It's a game changer.
oh,
Nice strong tea.
yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So um, now, what's a challenge that you'd like to put out to our listeners?
Great question. I would challenge everyone that's listening to this to revisit your why and to ask yourself, why are you teaching? What's the point? Why do you get up every morning? Because if it's for a pay packet, or if it's because of a promotion, or in my case early on because it sounded good at a barbecue, then don't do it. Like, find your why. My other challenge would be is find that teacher that made a difference in your life and reach out to them and thank them. We have the power of the internet. You don't tell me you can't find them. Find the teacher, write them a letter. If they're still here, send them a message and say, thank you for making a difference in my life. Because I guarantee that will make their week or make their month. So do that. Find that teacher, say thank you.
All right. That's yeah. I've got a couple of teachers that I'm still in contact with, and some who have passed on, but I managed to thank them before they did. So that was great.
Yeah.
And it did. It put a sparkle in their eyes. And I mean, I know when kids say, "Oh, thank you, sir," appreciate. Ex-students come back and they talk to you and they appreciate you. It's like it was worth it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, do you have a favorite? Now, I know you read a lot. You consume books like you consume your Earl Grey tea. So, do you have a favorite quote that really resonates with you or stuck with you over the years?
Oh, that is a really, really good question. Geez, I have so many. I'm going to say a quote from a painting that a friend of mine did. It's not a book. I have so many books that I love. And it's a quote called "Rest is best." It's really simple. We have it on our wall. I'm looking at it now. It's on a painting, and it's just a reminder, I think, to do everything out of a position of rest. I get we're at the end of the term. It's really hard, but I know that I don't make great decisions, and I'm not a wonderful person when I'm not rested. And so we bought that piece of paper we bought that painting with that quote on it, and it's a good reminder that yeah, rest is best. But I have so many quotes, yeah, but that's all I'm listening down.
Excellent. Well, when it goes up on a wall in your home, it
Yeah,
speaks volumes.
yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Now, it wouldn't be the Tattoo Teacher podcast if I didn't ask you, do you have any tattoos?
No, I don't have any tattoos. I was having this conversation with a person on my team last week. She has tattoos, and I was asking how to start because, yeah, I think I'm nervous of starting to get a tattoo. So, yes, answer your question, no, and I don't know how to start.
Yeah, just be careful because once you do, it can be very hard to stop.
Yeah, I was thinking about getting my kids' names somewhere.
Yep.
But I've also spent too much time looking on the internet at tattoo fails, and I'm like,
Oh, research is definitely important.
yeah,
Or
I don't know. I don't know if I'm the tattoo person. My wife has a suggestion. Okay, she reckons I need to get either her face or the Queen's face because I am a big fan of Her late Majesty the Queen.
yeah, well, my wife there mentions quite often that I should be getting her portrait on me as well. So
Yeah,
don't think I will.
I don't
I've got
think
her name though.
I don't think a face on my back would age well.
No,
No.
it's yeah. Oh, and that could quite possibly be one of those tattoo fails you were talking about.
Yeah, it could become an internet sensation. But no, I don't have any tattoos.
And last but certainly not least, if people want to find out more about you, your podcast, what you're doing, where's
Yeah.
the best place to look, to reach out?
Yeah, so the best place is I would search on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts, so The Art of Teaching. Um, So you'll see it. It's a lovely blue logo designed by a great friend of mine, and also I believe it is theartofteaching.org. That's the website. But anywhere around LinkedIn, I'll send you a couple of links to put in the show notes. But LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, pretty much everywhere. But just search on your favorite podcast provider. And and Phil, I just wanted to thank you for your time. I know you were very, very kind and generous, and you came and did an episode with me, and it's so wonderful to see what you have started, and I love encouraging fellow educational podcasters because I think it's a great space. And even though there's a lot of people doing podcasts, especially in education, there's not a lot of people doing the tattooed teacher podcast. So I think, like we were saying before, like you get to bring that uniqueness and that expression of who you are into a podcast form. And so I commend you for that. I know it's a labor of love. I know some days you probably don't feel like it. But I know that there will be countless people around the world, hopefully, that hear these conversations and go, yeah, I get to take something from that. So congratulations to you. And it is a
Thank you very
joy.
much.
And I can't wait to see where it goes, mate. It's really, really exciting.
Yeah, look, I am enjoying it, and it is, as you know, at times, yeah, very much a labour of love, but it's that conversation that even if just the one person listens to it and it helps them, I'm more than happy that I've gone to the effort to do this.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, mate, and it's an absolute joy to get to talk to you. I know I learned so much from our conversation when I had the privilege of interviewing you, and my hope is that there would be teachers out there that really get something from this discussion tonight. So thank you, and thank you for doing it in your holidays. That's a new level of uh, commitment right there.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for your time, Matthew. I appreciate it. Enjoy your upcoming holiday. Enjoy time with your wife and beautiful daughters, and
Thank
uh,
you.
and yeah, remember, rest is best.
Thank you, mate. Take care.
Thanks again. Thank you for listening to the Tattooed Teacher podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your network. Special thanks to DJ Fruit Salad for the music. You can find more of his work on Instagram at DJ Fruit Salad Official. Thanks again for listening, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Stay cool, be blessed.